Have you ever heard of self-compassion? Or maybe you realize you have a really hard inner critic and you're wondering how to quiet the voice of the inner critic or the inner perfectionist. Self-compassion is a great tool for that. And in this video, I want to share a story I had with one of the founders of the scientific modern self-compassion movement, Kristen Neff. Wonderful uh, researcher, celebrity in some ways because she's got a movie out about her autistic son, and she's a professor at the University of Austin, and she's researching self-compassion. She's written books, and she's amazing. And I had a little encounter with her, and then so after I tell you about this encounter, I'll go through her three principles of self-compassion. So let's rewind a few years and little tangent. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. It helps spread the word. And then do subscribe so that you get my notifications. I do 1 to 2 videos a week on how to stop binge eating. So be sure, if you're struggling with food, to like and subscribe. And then you can also check out the links in each of the video's descriptions. Okay, story time. I am 18, no, 22. This is after the monastery. In the monastery, they say mindfulness and self-compassion are two sides of the same coin. So if you're more mindful, you're naturally going to be more compassionate. And the flip side is true. If you're more compassionate and kind to yourself, you'll naturally be more connected and you'll be able to feel your emotions and be more present because you're not having that inner critic get you out of the present moment. So I am interested after the monastery in self-compassion, and I'm trying to find my life direction. I've met a lot of counselors and yoga teachers up in the monastery, and so I kind of am going in this direction. I get my yoga certification in 2012, start teaching yoga while I'm living at home, waiting for grad school to start, and I'm researching graduate programs to try to apply to. And I'm like, it's a shot in the dark, but why don't I message Kristen Neff and see if there's any openings in her program? And I'm kind of like a huge fan of hers. Self-compassion has been really important for me in my own journey through shame, my own struggles, learning how to be nice to myself, something that doesn't come naturally. And so I'm like, this is the woman who is redefining self-esteem. You know how like in schools they say we gotta boost kids' self-esteem and all that. Well, self-esteem, it turns out, is usually your self-esteem is higher when someone else's is lower, when you're winning and someone else is losing. There's a lot of like, get the good grades and then your self-esteem will be high. And then what if you get bad grades, right? So self-esteem is kind of a unbalanced concept that doesn't really work for everyone in many ways. And so Kristen Neff is like redefining, self-compassion as a much more versatile, it's much more effective in many ways to get the same outcomes of having confidence and having a good sense of who you are. It's a little bit different than self-esteem, but interesting. So anyway, so she's like kind of on the forefront of researching this and changing the dialogue, and she's written books, and so anyways, I shoot a shot in the dark. I'm like, it's a shot in the freaking dark. I'm like, okay. And she replies. She replies to some nobody, right? I mean, maybe I'm not a nobody. Maybe she's always on the lookout for potential graduate students. I don't know. But she replied. Department chair replied. And we went back and forth a few emails. And it's like, I've done that before. It was like, I've reached out to other chairs and in this process of searching. She was the only one that replied. I reached out to a bunch of people. She was the only one. And I know she's busy as heck. I know she has a family and research and books and conferences and blah, blah, blah. But she was the one who was available to me. And I'm not going to forget that. I'm not going to forget that because she practices what she preaches. The self-compassion stuff works. Even though she's busy as heck, there's something that when you're compassionate, it creates space. It creates presence. It allows for the inner critic to be there, but without without like really believing the inner critic, or maybe the volume of the inner critic is like turned down. You can imagine like a tight closet, and if you're yelling in a tight closet, it's gonna sound really loud. But if you go in a cave, a spacious cave, or you go to the ocean, right, and then you're yelling, it's like, well, it's not as loud, it's not as intense. And so I think self-compassion really helps quiet the inner voice, the inner critic, and to, it takes a while. I'm not going to say this is overnight. It takes probably years of practice, but this is something that has really transformed my life. I'm not mean to myself anymore. Really, I take pride in how nice I am to myself. Oh, you need a nap? Okay, well let's this is how I talk to myself, by the way. I'm like, oh yeah, let's take a nap. Are you okay, Jared? You okay, little Jared? All right. All right, I hear that you're tired, you got a headache. Oh, okay. Let's take it easy. You know? And so, okay, next part of the video I promised was the 3 keys of self-compassion. These are the kind of the things that are defined through research and validated through research and found to be highly effective. So we're going to start with the first one because it's probably the most familiar to you. Mindfulness. If you're struggling in life, wherever, job, food, relationships, you're struggling, there's pain. Where do you feel the pain in your body? It's very important. Where do you feel the pain in your body? Can you feel the energy? Not a story. Don't be creating the story about how you always fail or how you're always betrayed. No story. Where's that energy in your body? Is it a headache? Is it a pressure? Is it tightness? Is it hot? Is it dead? Is it sad energy? Is it, clogged energy? What, like, can you feel the energy? And as I always recommend, can you write that energy out on paper? Can you write either the mood you're in or the emotion or the feeling or the physical sensation? Can you write that onto paper? That's like the mindful part. That's step 1. And then the next part, which I found to be, again, pretty normal, but refreshing. It was the self-talk. And this is where, if you're working with me, I often will ask you about the tone in which you're speaking to yourself. So as you write down your thoughts, you're going to have this thought that like, oh, you're going to have all these thoughts, right? But if you write down the thought and then you're asked, like, what is the tone of voice in which the thoughts are speaking to you? That's when things get really interesting. You'll hear, like, sometimes, off the top of my head, I'm thinking of people that I worked with in the past and so forth. But one woman, she had a manipulative voice. Have that cookie, darling. It'll make you feel better. You need to calm down. And so when she became aware of this tone, it was like, ooh, that voice is tricking me. Another voice was of a different woman. You always fail. This is not going to work. Don't do this. It's not going to work. Don't get your hopes up. You hear that tone of voice? Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't. It's very strict. And she could start to talk back to it. Hey, 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 calm the fuck down, right? But so this self-talk thing is you hear the thoughts, right? And when you hear the negative thoughts and you kind of write them down on paper, you can get separation from them. You can see them, and then naturally, very naturally, you respond differently. You're like, you know what? Hey, let me be gentle, easy, patient, kind. You develop this voice for yourself, especially how you treat yourself. You're more forgiving. So that's step 2. And then the final step is this is the revolutionary thing, which I always found very interesting. It was the universal law. I'm forgetting the name, but it was basically everyone suffers. If you're suffering with eating, guess what? Millions, probably billions. I don't know. Billions. Yeah, sure. Let's go billions with eating. People are hurting with you. People are hurting with you. They are in pain too. You're not the only one who's in pain. You're not the only one. And I know for me, how this really resonated with me was when I learned about attachments. So like I have an avoidant attachment. This is kind of a different therapeutic concept, but basically my default style in relationships is to like be avoidant, right? To like pull back, to be, essentially I'm afraid of intimacy. That's my default pattern. And so I've always struggled in relationships and connecting with people. And this has changed over time. But for me, it was a horribly painful pattern that manifested also in eating and so forth. And so for me to hear that a lot of other people have avoidant attachment patterns, and some people have disorganized, and other people have anxious, and um, it helped me, just say, hey, I have this problem, but there's like a lot of people have this problem. I need to work on it. It doesn't mean like it's just it removes the shame, right? The social shame. That's what this thing does. When we realize that other people are suffering, we realize we're not alone. We're not different. We're not. Life is not like unfair. I mean, in many ways, it is unfair, but at least it's equally unfair. And for me, like just knowing that other people were born into this as well, it helped me just be like, okay, I'm in a relationship right now and I really want to pull back. I really want to run away. But this is my default pattern and there's nothing wrong with this default pattern. It's just how it is. Other people have this pattern as well. And so can I stay here in this uncomfortable space? Can I stay here? Can I not let my default pattern run away? I think previously before I'd be like, "Oh no, I'm scared and I'm upset that I'm scared," and like it just creates a cascade of negative emotions. I'm scared and I'm upset that I'm scared and then I'm beating myself up for being scared and try harder, and then when I do try harder it's like it's totally coming from this awkward place and yeah. So, let's wrap up this video. 3 keys: mindfulness, feel it, patience, talk to that negative voice in a patient way, and realize you're not alone. And yeah, we'll call it at this. Be sure to subscribe, like the channel, and so forth. Check out the links down below. A lot of cool resources down there. And with that being said,